It started like any other day. I was on my way to the bank to handle some errands. I hadn't even planned on stepping inside the building for long, but I needed to check on a few things for my business. I walked in with a quick glance at the clock. It was nearly lunchtime, and the bank was busy with people milling about, waiting in line. The line moved slowly, and I could feel the tension in the air. Something was off, but I couldn't place it. I stepped up to the counter, greeted by a young teller who didn't even look up as I approached. "Good morning," I said, trying to break the ice. "Yeah, what do you need?" she asked in a tone that was sharper than I expected. I felt a pang in my chest, but I ignored it. I had business to take care of. I handed her my bank card, a simple transaction. But as she took it, I noticed her expression shift. She glanced at the card, then back at me with an odd look, as if unsure whether to continue or not. Something about the way she hesitated made my stomach tighten. "Can I help you?" I asked again, trying to keep my voice calm. Her fingers drummed on the counter. "I just need to verify something first," she said flatly. Her eyes flickered briefly to the screen and back to me. I could tell that she hadn't expected me to be anyone of importance. She seemed to be growing impatient as I stood there. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my patience beginning to wear thin. Her response was nothing like what I'd expected. She suddenly reached forward, swiping my card from the counter with a cold motion and, before I could react, slammed it back down onto the counter with a force that startled me. "Do you mind waiting while I figure this out?" she snapped, her words stinging more than the action. The entire scene was a blur. I stood there for a moment, stunned. It felt like the world had paused. People were moving around me, oblivious to what had just happened. The teller had already turned her back to me, her fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that seemed almost deliberate. I could feel a flush creeping up my neck, and my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I wasn't sure what had just transpired, but I knew it wasn't normal. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a little tighter than before. "I've been a client here for years. Is everything all right?" She didn't even acknowledge my question. Instead, she muttered something under her breath, too quiet for me to catch, and kept typing. My mind raced. What did she mean by that? I could already sense the growing unease. Her treatment of me had gone from indifferent to downright dismissive in a matter of seconds. She was treating me like I didn't belong here, and it stung. I glanced around at the other customers in the bank. Some were talking to the tellers, some were waiting in line, but no one was paying attention to me. No one saw what was happening. My frustration was building, but I didn't want to make a scene. Not yet. I took a deep breath, preparing to speak again. "Is there a problem?" "Because I really need to finish this." Before I could finish my sentence, she snapped around to face me. Her eyes were wide, and there was a nervous edge to her voice as she tried to explain. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we'll need to." She was cut off mid-sentence by the sudden sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I turned my head, and that's when I saw him, the branch manager. His name was David. A tall, well-dressed man in his mid-40s, who I knew from prior dealings. His sharp eyes darted to me, then to the teller. He looked confused, and his face twisted with concern as he noticed the tension in the air. "Is everything all right here?" David asked, his voice calm but authoritative. The teller, suddenly flustered, stammered something about verifying my account, her explanation becoming a jumble of words. I stood there, frozen, as the realization hit me. She had no idea who I was. David's gaze shifted from the teller to me, and I could see the recognition flicker in his eyes. He had worked with me before, and I knew he was aware of the significance of my account. The bank had been handling my business for years, and every transaction was meticulously monitored, especially considering the size of the investments I was managing. He gave a small, subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of what I knew he had just realized. "I apologize for the inconvenience, ma'am," David said, his voice now much smoother, his tone almost too friendly. "We'll sort this out right away." The teller didn't meet my eyes, her face flushed as she fumbled with the computer screen. She tried to salvage the situation, but it was clear she was uncomfortable with how things had escalated. Her hands were shaking slightly now, as if she had suddenly realized the magnitude of her mistake. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. I just wanted this over with. David quickly stepped in, placing a hand on the teller's shoulder and guiding her aside, all while keeping his eyes on me. "I'll handle this from here," he said, his voice calm but firm. I barely nodded. My patience was running thin, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I had been humiliated in front of a room full of strangers, and for what? A simple bank transaction. But it wasn't just about the awkwardness of the moment. It was the way she had treated me, dismissive, rude, as though I was just another random customer with no importance. David continued, his demeanor shifting to one of professionalism. "I'm very sorry for this. You are one of our most valued clients, and I can assure you, this situation will be addressed immediately." I could see the hesitation in his eyes as he glanced at the teller, who was still standing at the other counter, her head down. "She's just a little new," he added quickly, as if trying to justify her behavior. But the words didn't sit right with me. The more I thought about it, the more the situation seemed deliberate, as if it wasn't just an accident or a mistake. The tension in my chest tightened. I had a gut feeling something deeper was at play here, and I wasn't going to let it slide. David led me to a private office in the back of the bank, away from the bustling customers. The door clicked shut behind us, sealing us into the quiet space. I took a seat, trying to calm my racing thoughts. It wasn't just about the bank transaction anymore, it was about the disrespect, the way I'd been treated like an afterthought. David sat across from me, his expression now more serious. "I really can't apologize enough for what happened," he said, his tone sincere. "I don't want you to think for a second that this is how we do business here." I nodded, but I wasn't ready to just brush it off. "I don't appreciate being treated that way, David. I've been a loyal customer here for years, and for someone to treat me like I don't matter? That's unacceptable." He nodded, his lips pressed tightly together. "I understand. And you're right to be upset. That kind of behavior doesn't reflect the values we hold here." He paused, glancing at the door as if making sure no one could overhear. "You may not know this, but you're one of the most significant clients at this branch, maybe even the most important one." I tilted my head, not entirely understanding what he meant. "I'm sorry, I don't follow." David's eyes flickered nervously, then he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The thing is, your accounts, both personal and business, are worth more than most people realize. You're involved in some high-stakes investments, and those investments are tied into multiple portfolios. You're not just another customer." My heart skipped a beat. I'd always known my business dealings were substantial, but hearing David confirm it like that made something click. The teller, who had treated me so poorly, had no idea who I was. And that made her reaction seem even more out of place. "She didn't recognize me?" I asked, the weight of the realization heavy in my chest. David's jaw tightened. "No. She's new, but her attitude," he paused, as if unsure how to continue. "I'm not sure what was going through her mind. I will handle this personally, believe me." My mind raced as I thought about what this meant. If she had no clue who I was, it would explain the way she dismissed me. But something still felt off. I looked David in the eye. "I want to know everything. What exactly happened? Why was I treated like that?" David hesitated for a moment before replying, his voice low. "I can't say for sure, but I'll investigate. I promise you, this will not go unnoticed." He had no idea that my instincts were telling me something wasn't right. As David continued to apologize, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. His words seemed genuine, but I could sense the unease in his demeanor. It wasn't just about the teller's mistake anymore, it was about the system itself. The fact that someone could be treated this way, without even knowing the magnitude of their client, suggested a deeper issue at play. "David," I said, my voice steady but firm, "I need more than just an apology. I need to understand why this happened." He shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming on the desk nervously. "I understand. I'll look into it," he said again, but there was a slight tremor in his voice this time. "But I'll be honest, I think there's more going on here than just a simple mistake." My eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, clearly weighing his next words. "This branch has been under some pressure recently. We've been getting more and more high-profile clients, and honestly, some of the newer staff are, let's just say they're not equipped to handle everything that comes with it." I stared at him, processing what he'd just said. High-profile clients. The bank had been handling more important clients than usual, and the pressure on the staff was increasing. Was it possible the teller felt overwhelmed and let that affect her behavior? Or was there something else going on? "But that doesn't excuse her behavior," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "It doesn't matter if she's new or under pressure. I should never have been treated like that." David nodded in agreement. "You're absolutely right. And that's why I'm going to personally take this up with the higher-ups. We can't afford to have this kind of thing happening again." I wasn't convinced. "David, you and I both know that the problem is bigger than just one teller. This is about how your entire system views its clients. I've been coming here for years, and I've never felt like I mattered until now." He looked down at his hands, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry. I don't have a good excuse for that. But I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make sure it doesn't happen again." There was a long silence between us. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing on both of us. I was done with apologies. I wanted results. "David, I appreciate the offer to investigate," I said, standing up. "But I need to know that this won't happen to anyone else. If I don't see action, I'll be forced to take my business elsewhere." His face tightened, but he nodded. "I understand. And I'll make sure you're kept in the loop every step of the way." I turned to leave, but something about the situation nagged at me. The teller's cold treatment. The way David seemed to dance around certain details. I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I left the bank that day with a sense of unease weighing heavily on my shoulders. As much as David had tried to assure me everything would be taken care of, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way the teller had treated me, the way David was so quick to deflect, it all seemed too rehearsed. Too convenient. I couldn't just let this go. The next day, I called the bank again, asking for an update. I was transferred between departments and passed from one person to the next until I finally reached David's direct line. He sounded tired when he picked up. "Hello," he said, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "David, it's me. I wanted to check in. You promised me you'd investigate. What's going on?" There was a long pause. "I've spoken to the teller, and she's been reprimanded. And I'm pushing for further action on my end." "Reprimanded?" I scoffed. "Is that it? She treated me like dirt, David. I need more than just some internal memo. This is about how people are treated, regardless of who they are." David sighed. "I understand, but these things take time. I've escalated it to upper management, and they're taking it seriously." But there was something in his voice, a hesitation, that told me the truth. This wasn't just about one teller making a mistake. There was something deeper at play, something I was missing. I had enough. "I want to meet with someone from upper management," I said, my voice firm. "Someone who can explain to me what's really going on." There was another long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear David's internal struggle. "I'll set up a meeting," he finally said, his voice resigned. "But I need to warn you, this is going to take a lot of time and energy. It might not go the way you want. I don't care, I replied. I'm not backing down. I'll be there, and I expect answers. I hung up the phone, feeling a surge of determination. I was done with waiting for something to happen. If this bank didn't want to treat me with respect, I'd make sure they understood exactly what they stood to lose. The next morning, I walked back into the bank, my steps deliberate and sure. I had an appointment with upper management, and I wasn't leaving without answers. I arrived at the bank well ahead of my scheduled meeting, giving myself some time to collect my thoughts. I didn't know what to expect from the management team, but I was ready for anything. I wasn't going to let this slip through the cracks. Not this time. David greeted me in the lobby with a tight smile, his posture stiff, like he was bracing for something. Thanks for coming in. The manager is expecting you. He led me through the back corridors, past rows of cubicles filled with busy employees. We reached a sleek, glass-walled conference room. Inside, a man and woman were already seated at the table, reviewing paperwork. They both looked up as we entered. Good morning, the man said, his voice formal but with a slight edge. I'm Richard, the regional manager, and this is Jennifer, our operations director. I nodded at them both, taking a seat across from them. David stood awkwardly near the door, clearly still caught in the middle of this situation. Jennifer smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. We understand there's been some frustration on your end. We want to make sure we address everything properly today. I met her gaze evenly. I'm not just frustrated, Jennifer. I'm offended. The way I was treated by one of your tellers wasn't just poor customer service, it was disrespectful. And frankly, I feel like I've been dismissed because of assumptions made about who I am. Richard leaned forward, his fingers steepled in front of him. I understand that this situation has been upsetting, and we take it very seriously. We've reviewed the incident, and we're committed to ensuring that something like this doesn't happen again. But that's the problem, I said, leaning forward as well. You're treating it like an isolated issue when it's clear there's a deeper problem here. It's not just one teller. It's the culture you're fostering, one where employees assume they can treat people poorly without consequences. The room fell silent for a moment. I could see both Richard and Jennifer exchanging glances, and I could feel the weight of my words pressing on them. They hadn't expected this level of confrontation, and it was clear they didn't know how to respond immediately. David, still standing near the door, looked uncomfortable. He probably didn't anticipate things going this way, either. But this was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to lay everything out on the table. I don't want to hear about policies or empty apologies anymore, I continued. I want to see changes. I want to know what steps you're taking to ensure that the people you hire understand what it means to treat every client with dignity, no matter who they are. Richard shifted in his chair, his expression hardening. We've already reprimanded the teller involved, and we're providing additional training to all staff members regarding customer service and inclusivity. But I will not tolerate this kind of tone, madam. We're trying to resolve this matter with professionalism, and we expect you to reciprocate. His response stung, but I didn't back down. I'm being professional. I'm giving you the opportunity to prove that you're serious about this. But if your solution is just another round of training, I'll take my business elsewhere. Jennifer's smile finally faded. Let's not make rash decisions, shall we? We can assure you we're doing everything we can to prevent this from happening again. I could see they were scrambling. They didn't expect someone like me to challenge them so directly, to demand accountability in a way that made them uncomfortable. Then show me, I said firmly, my gaze unwavering. Show me you're not just paying lip service. I want a full review of your hiring practices, and I want assurances that this kind of treatment will be addressed, no matter who the client is. Only then will I consider staying. There was an almost imperceptible pause before Richard nodded stiffly. We will look into everything, and we will get back to you with a detailed report. It wasn't exactly the resolution I had hoped for, but it was a step forward. I stood up, my heart pounding with the adrenaline of the confrontation. "I'll be waiting for that report," I said. "And believe me, I'll be watching." I turned and walked out of the room, feeling a surge of satisfaction. For once, I wasn't just another client. I was taking control, making my voice heard. It had been a few weeks since my meeting with the bank's management, and while I waited for their promised report, I kept a close eye on everything. Every communication, every email, every phone call. I wasn't about to let them sweep this under the rug. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. The email subject line read, "Report on Customer Experience and Employee Training Initiatives." I opened it immediately, scanning through the formal language, the apologies, and the promises of changes. There was a section on revised customer service training and a detailed outline of new inclusivity programs. But something about it didn't sit right. It all felt like a well-crafted PR response, full of fluff but lacking in real substance. I was about to close the email when I noticed a small, attached document labeled Staff Evaluation and Accountability. My fingers hovered over it, and I hesitated. Was this where the truth was? I opened it. It detailed the steps taken to address the incident, including the reprimanding of the teller and the additional training provided to her. But as I read on, I realized something: there was no mention of any deeper investigation. No mention of how they planned to review or change the attitudes that allowed such an incident to occur in the first place. And there it was, the part that made my blood run cold. They were covering up the most crucial part of the story. The teller had been reprimanded, yes, but the real issue, the attitude and assumptions that led to her behavior, wasn't being addressed. The problem wasn't just that she'd treated me poorly. It was that she had assumed I wasn't important, assumed I didn't belong. The training, the report, it was all a facade. They hadn't truly learned anything. The bank was more concerned about damage control than making real, lasting changes. I felt the anger rise again. I had expected better, expected real accountability, not just empty promises. But I wasn't about to let them off the hook. I closed my laptop, grabbed my phone, and dialed the number for corporate headquarters. I needed to go higher. I needed someone who could see through the smoke and mirrors. When the phone picked up, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm calling about a serious issue that has yet to be properly addressed. I've been waiting for a real response to an incident at one of your branches, and what I've received so far is unacceptable. I need to speak with someone who can actually make changes. Now." The voice on the other end paused, taken aback. "I can certainly assist with that, ma'am. Let me transfer you to someone who can help." As I was transferred up the chain, I felt a mix of frustration and determination. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let them treat me like just another statistic. Hours later, I was speaking with someone much higher up the ladder, a woman named Claire, the head of customer relations. She listened patiently as I laid out my grievances, every detail of the experience, and what I had learned from the report. "I appreciate you taking the time to share all this," Claire said, her voice calm but firm. "We take these matters very seriously. I can assure you that we are committed to making substantial changes. I will personally oversee the investigation into this branch and the handling of your case." I could feel the sincerity in her voice. For the first time, I felt like I was being taken seriously. We spoke for another half hour, going over potential improvements to their processes and how they could ensure that every client, regardless of their background, was treated with the respect they deserved. She promised immediate changes, and I promised I'd be watching. When we ended the call, I felt a strange sense of closure. The bank had tried to sweep this under the rug, but I had forced them to confront it. More importantly, I had forced them to face the uncomfortable truth, that things needed to change, and if they didn't, they risked losing clients like me. I wasn't just some random customer anymore. I was a reminder that we all have the power to demand better, to hold people and organizations accountable. As I sat back, reflecting on everything, I realized that sometimes the smallest, most frustrating moments can lead to the biggest changes. I had gone in there for a simple transaction. What I got was so much more, a fight for respect, for equality, and for a world where no one, regardless of their status, was ever dismissed again. And that felt like a victory.